It has never been more clear as we have some brand new surprising reports surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs plans, including one big report surrounding Brad Marchand that has fans fired up. We'll break that down as well as discuss some other updates here regarding free agency and trades ahead of what's going to be a crazy next few days and next few weeks. Before we get into it all, folks, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable. We're on the road to 30,000 subscribers. If you want to help us towards that goal and you're a part of that 71%, make sure to hit that subscribe button. There's a lot to go over today. And obviously, we're at a point now in the offseason where things are starting to get very, very real. And it has never been more clear surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs in their pursuit of Brad Marchand. And we're going to dive into that as some new reports have dropped. And let's start with some interesting ones. Now, this first one might scare some people here. Chris Johnson came out and said that Brad Marchand's bidding could go north of $8 million over 4 years. We're going to start with this. This is might be a reason to not want Brad Marchand at Penning, but after what we're seeing from him in the last Stanley Cup Finals game, the entire, cup run, like even what we've experienced firsthand as Leafs fans when they went up against Florida, it has been dominant. And I truly think that Brad Marchand's a player, and some might disagree, that will age very, very well. And we're seeing what Corey Perry is doing right now. And I think Brad Marchand could mimic that maybe even a little bit better as he gets up there in age. That being said, $8 million 4 years, that takes up a hefty chunk. But at some point, it seems that every player out there is going to cost a lot of money, and the Leafs are going to go after someone. And we have a new report here surrounding the Leafs' interest in a minute, but the bidding is going to go over 4 years, we assume, for around $8 million.
I mean, in any free agency, you're never really going to get any hot commodity for a reasonable price. You're usually overpaying for even the middle of the pack guys, right? We know that through free agency. So we got to keep that in mind, of course, with Brad Marchand. But the more reports that come out, the more I think my mindset is changing to maybe the Leafs shouldn't go for Brad Marchand. And there's a couple reasons for that, and we'll get into them. Obviously, what he's doing in the Stanley Cup final right now is unbelievable, literally unheard of. He's been fantastic. And all throughout the playoffs, he's offered that depth scoring that the Florida Panthers need. But the thing with Brad Marchand is the Florida Panthers play a very similar style to the Boston Bruins of 15 years ago. So we have to keep that in mind as well. He fits pretty seamlessly into their system. He's also 38 years old. So if there is a bidding war and he does want a 4 year contract and he's not going to budge off 3 or 4 years, very quickly you're going to find yourself with Brad Marchand in his early 40s, and he's played a lot of hockey at this point. So we have to keep that in mind. Now, would Brad Marchand, I've been saying it on the channel, be great on the Leafs? Would he change the DNA, all of those things? Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. And I think that he would be great on the Leafs, but it has to make at least some sense in terms of the term and the cap hit, right? Because if he's going up to $8 or $9 million in a bidding war and it is 4 years, I know there's going to be a team out there that is going to pay for that. But if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'd be a little skeptical of that. And I think that you should put all your efforts forward in finding the next Brad Marchand, the next Sam Bennett. These guys, obviously Florida traded for them, right? But Sam Bennett made his name known in Florida, right? He wasn't playing this way in Calgary and then they went out and traded for him. They basically developed him into that player, and the way that they play and the system in place allows him to be that guy. So I think the Leafs should be a little bit more concerned with finding their own guy. All of this to be said, there's a lot of different factors in free agency. Maybe Brad Marchand's like, you know what? I actually really badly want to be a Leaf for some reason, right? Maybe I really want to come to Toronto. There's endorsement deals waiting for me. I'll take a little bit less, a little fewer years, stuff like that. But I think the Leafs have to be very careful with Brad Marchand because he's played a lot of hockey at this point. Again, I think that he would help the team. And if the deal made some sense, I know you're going to overpay in some way. If it made some sense, I would do it. But again, some of the reports that are coming out, if you're going to make $8 or $9 million and you're going to be 40 very soon, that could be tough.
Yeah, and obviously, let's get into the new report now as well that we're experiencing here from Pierre LeBrun now. So every reporter is kind of touching in. The Leafs are expected to be one potential landing spot for the Brad Marchand. He even mentioned during the second round series against Toronto that he grew up a Leafs fan. That said, several teams are expected to be in the mix if and when Marchand hits the open market. And you pair that again with the fact that he's going to be making north of $8 million. It's going to be a big bidding war, and that's what Pierre LeBrun's saying. That being said, more and more reports are starting to come out and starting to fly surrounding the fact that the Leafs are going to be seriously interested. It seems like their interest in Sam Bennett has declined. It seems that their interest in some of the other free agents, of course, Mitch Marner, assuming that he leaves now, which all signs point to. Marchand makes the most sense, and the worry is, of course, like you mentioned, 41, 42 years old by the time the contract ends. That is a big issue. But you also have guys like Nick Kypreos coming out and saying the Leafs need to sign Brad Marchand, and here's why. Sorry, of course, this isn't necessarily a report, but it's him saying that the Leafs need to do it. And I'm seeing more and more people. I'm fully on the Brad Marchand train. I'm fine paying him for the next 3 years, even if it is at that number of 8 million. I don't know about that, but even then, like the Leafs have a window of 3 years. But the problem is with this report from Pierre LeBrun, with all these different reports, you can see here, if it is Florida, I think it's going to be closer to 5 to 5.4 over that 3, or a 4-year term. Someone's going to step up. I think if he ends up signing with the Leafs, my guess would be 3 years, 4 years at around 7 million, probably something of that if they can get it down there. But you mentioned it. If you are reasonable with, if the front office and any front office is reasonable and trying to be super responsible with every free agent, you're going to finish second in every free agent bidding. You're never going to land the one that you actually want. So maybe the Leafs, maybe this is the player that they expand their salary for, and they convince themselves, hey, with the money we saved by getting John Tavares at a discount, we can use then to put maybe a little bit more towards an overpay of Brad Marchand, because I do think he would help. That being said, if you get John Tavares and Brad Marchand back, you have some risk there that, maybe they lose a step in the offseason, and they lose a step, because then you're, paying two guys in their mid to late 30s for the next 2 to 3 years. And it's either going to work out extremely well if they keep up their production, or if they fall off, you're kind of screwed, quite frankly, because you're going to have to, you have a lot of salary locked up.
Yeah, and they're getting older quickly, right? And in the case of John Tavares, obviously, I think he still has some runway left, but Brad Marchand is getting older. And again, like I mentioned, he's played a lot of hockey in the Stanley Cup final, right? Something to consider. Although I do think, we've talked a lot about the DNA change, right? And that is something that would come with Brad Marchand, adding him to the team. But what this team needs really, and again, if this goes into a bidding war, like that's dangerous, right? You have to consider all your options, and maybe you just back out and you go, okay, this is not for us, right? But it's a mindset change that is what this team needs entirely. It's not just one player and Brad Marchand that's going to change it. They need a couple players and the leadership group that's already here to establish a change. And now that Mitch Marner is leaving, that might help a little bit. Maybe certain things will, come into alignment a little bit more, because obviously we saw through the documentary and all that a couple years ago. He's in the middle of that too, Mitch Marner, and not just him, but all three of the top guys, all four of the top guys kind of in the mix there, and why things weren't in alignment. But that's mostly what they need. But again, this is a guy that would certainly help, but it just has to make sense. And the fact that, if he signs in Florida, it's 5 or 6 million, but if it's anywhere else, and if it's Toronto Maple Leafs, it's got to be an absurd contract, right? Of course, that's going to be out there before the season ends, but I think it's going to be interesting, right? There was another report that I do want to bring up. And listen, I am saying that Brad Marchand would fit in with the Leafs, and I think it makes sense, but I'm just very cautious of the dollar amount, and maybe they should turn their efforts to finding somebody else, right? That could also help with the DNA change and bringing in that different mindset. But there was another report that Brad Marchand is looking for maybe a contract or to go somewhere where there's a lot of endorsement deals too, right? And we covered that earlier this week as well. So that's something to consider. If you come to Toronto, they're going to put Brad Marchand in every commercial possible for any company, any endorsement deal. So I think that is another interesting, twist to this as well, that maybe he takes a little bit less and he's guaranteed stuff like that. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. He said that he grew up a Leafs fan. The Leafs could absolutely use him, but I'm a little skeptical about the whole bidding war thing that's kind of surfaced over the last couple of days.
Yeah, there's a state tax thing that benefits Florida. Can Florida afford him? Chris Johnson coming out and saying the Leafs have make some sense on some level, which is an interesting report. Chris Johnson, again, you mentioned it. Look at all of his stats. Since 2011, he's been fantastic in the Stanley Cup. And you can see here this Stanley Cup final, 37 years old, 5 games, 6 goals, 2 game winners. But again, he's 37 now. Will be 38 by the time that next postseason rolls around. So It'll be how much can you really expect? I think he's going to age fantastically, and he's proven that throughout his career. And guys like Corey Perry should be the exception to the rule, not the rule, but I think that Brad Marchand would be a pretty good exception to that rule. But let us know down below what your thoughts are. It's never been more clear that the Leafs are going after some pretty big fish here in the free agency market, and we'll keep you up to date every step of the way. So thank you guys for watching. You guys are beasts. See you later.